The wind howled across the open plains, carrying with it the bitter cold of the alien night. Above, 2 pale moons hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the gathering of the clan. The fire in the center crackled, but its warmth could not reach the heart of Kayla, a young alien mother standing alone with her small son. Rin, the elders sat in a half-circle, their faces hard and unfeeling, their eyes filled with judgment. "You broke the law," the eldest one said, his voice like stone. "You saved a human," another added. "You brought shame to our people." Kayla held Rin close, feeling his small body shiver. She wanted to speak, to explain, but she knew the truth would not matter here. She had found the human soldier bleeding on the edge of the forest weeks ago. She had given him water, bandaged his wounds, and hidden him until he could walk again. To her clan, humans were dangerous, unpredictable, enemies in the great border conflicts. To Kayla, in that moment, he had only been a life in need. The guards stepped forward, their spears tipped with glowing energy. "By the will of the council, you are banished," the eldest declared. The words felt like ice in Kayla's chest. Banished meant death, no home, no shelter, no protection from the predators that roamed the wild. Still, she held her head high. If she had to choose between letting an innocent die and facing exile, she would make the same choice again. The guards pushed her toward the village gates. Rin clung to her arm, whispering, "Where will we go, Mama?" Her heart ached, because she had no answer. The gates opened, revealing the endless night beyond. The wind carried the distant sound of alien beasts, low and hungry. She stepped forward, her bare feet crunching against the frost-covered ground. The gates closed behind her with a final heavy thud. For hours they walked under the twin moons. Kayla's legs ached, but she kept moving. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every whisper of wind sounded like claws scraping over rock. Rin's breathing grew slower, heavier, as exhaustion pulled at him. She could not stop, not here. There were stories of travelers who camped in the open and never saw the sunrise. As they reached the edge of the Great Plains, Kayla paused. Somewhere far beyond these grasslands lived a human, an old farmer who had stayed after the last war. She had heard his name once, in a hushed conversation, Daniel. Some aliens saw him as a strange hermit, some as a fool for living alone among dangerous borders. But Kayla remembered the rumor that he helped those who had nowhere else to go. She did not know if it was true, but it was the only hope she had. The night deepened, and the wind grew sharper. Rin whimpered, his small hands clutching at her worn cloak. "Just a little longer," she whispered, though she had no idea how far the human farm really was. Behind them, something moved in the tall grass. Kayla froze, her ears twitching toward the sound. It was low, steady, and too deliberate to be the wind. Her grip on Rin tightened. A pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared in the darkness. Her heart pounded. She took a slow step back, shielding Rin with her body. The creature stepped forward, revealing a sleek, muscular frame, a night stalker, one of the deadliest predators on the plains. Kayla's mind raced. She could not fight it. Her energy blade was gone, taken by the guards. She could not outrun it while carrying Rin. Then, in the distance, a flicker of light, faint but real. It was far across the plain, but it could be a campfire, or maybe a farm light. Hope burned inside her chest. She whispered to Rin, "Hold on to me, no matter what," and ran. The stalker hissed, its claws slicing through the grass. Kayla's breath came in ragged gasps, her legs burning as she ran toward the distant light. The beast closed in, its shadow stretching longer with every bound. Rin buried his face in her shoulder. The ground felt uneven, every step a risk of falling. Still, she ran. The light grew brighter, then a sudden sharp sound split the night, a loud crack. Like thunder, the stalker screamed and stumbled, falling back into the grass. Kayla skidded to a halt, her chest heaving. From the light ahead, a tall figure stepped forward. In his hands was a long weapon that still smoked at the barrel. The human farmer Daniel stood in the moonlight, his face shadowed but his voice firm. "You're a long way from home," he said. Kayla took a shaky breath, clutching Rin tighter. "Please," she managed. "We need help." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his eyes unreadable. Then he nodded once, slowly. "Come inside," he said, turning toward the light. Kayla followed, the gates of the human farm closing behind them, sealing away the night and the eyes still watching from the dark. The heavy wooden gate shut with a deep thud behind them, locking out the endless dark of the plains. Daniel stood tall, his silhouette outlined by the glow of a single lamp hanging near the porch. His weathered face told stories of years under alien suns. His eyes, sharp and steady, studied Kayla and the boy without a word. The rifle in his hands still smelled of burned powder. Kayla could feel Rin trembling, but the boy kept his head on her shoulder. The only sound was the slow creak of the windmill turning somewhere in the distance. Daniel finally spoke, his voice rough from years of solitude. "You two are lucky," he said. "That stalker was just one of them." Kayla's eyes widened. "One of them?" she asked, her voice shaking. Daniel nodded toward the plains. "They hunt in pairs sometimes." He stepped aside and motioned for them to follow. The wooden boards of the porch groaned under their weight as they entered the farmhouse. Inside, the air was warmer, smelling faintly of smoke and cooked grain. The small living room was lit by an old lantern, casting soft golden light on walls covered in shelves. Books, tools, and strange human trinkets filled the space. Rin's wide alien eyes darted from object to object. Daniel set his rifle by the door but kept his hand close to it. "Sit," he said, pointing to a sturdy wooden chair near the hearth. Kayla lowered herself into it. Pulling Rin onto her lap, Daniel moved to the stove, ladling something thick and steaming into 2 metal bowls. He placed one in front of Kayla and another in front of Rin. "Eat," he said simply. Rin hesitated, glancing at his mother. Kayla gave a small nod. The boy took a cautious spoonful. Then another, faster this time. Daniel watched without expression, but his eyes softened just a little. "You're not from any settlement I know," he said, his tone more curious than accusing. Kayla looked down at her bowl. "We were sent away," she said quietly. Daniel didn't press for details, but he didn't need to. The way she clutched the boy told him enough. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Daniel's gaze shifted to the darkness beyond. "This land," he said slowly, "is far from safe." He paused, as if weighing his next words. "You can stay the night. Maybe a few." Kayla looked up quickly, hope and fear mixing in her eyes. "But trouble has a way of finding those who come here," he added, his voice low. Kayla nodded. "We have nowhere else." Daniel gave a short grunt, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. He moved to a locked cabinet in the corner and pulled out a folded map. He spread it on the table, the paper worn and stained from years of use. "This is the plains," he said, pointing to a wide swath of empty land. "Your clan?" he asked, glancing at her. Kayla hesitated before pointing to a small mark near the hills, far from his farm. Daniel tapped the map between their 2 points. "That's a lot of ground for things to go wrong," he muttered, mostly to himself. Rin had finished eating and was now fighting to keep his eyes open. Daniel stood, pulling a folded blanket from a shelf. "You take the bed," he told Kayla. "I'll sleep in the chair." Kayla shook her head. "No, we can." But Daniel cut her off with a small wave of his hand. "It's my house," he said. "I make the rules." As Kayla carried Rin to the small bedroom, Daniel returned to the window. Beyond the lamplight, the plains were black and empty. But he knew better. Somewhere out there, something was still watching. His hand tightened around the curtain edge. He had lived alone for years, keeping to himself, avoiding trouble. But now, trouble had walked right through his gate, holding the hand of a child. The first light of dawn crept through the dusty window, painting the small bedroom in a pale gold glow. Kayla opened her eyes slowly, for a moment forgetting where she was. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and something sweet, a smell She had never known in her own village. Rin was curled up beside her, breathing softly, his face finally calm after days of fear. From the other room came the faint clink of metal. Kayla stepped quietly into the main room, finding Daniel at the small table, cleaning his rifle. He looked up briefly, then went back to his work. "Morning," he said, his tone flat but not unkind. Kayla nodded, unsure if she should thank him again or keep her silence. Her kind often said humans did not like too many words in the morning. Daniel pushed a small plate toward her, holding bread in a thick spread that smelled rich and earthy. "Eat," he said. "Then we'll talk about work." Kayla blinked. "Work?" she asked. Daniel gave a small shrug. "If you're staying, you help." It wasn't cruel, just the way he spoke, as if stating a law of nature. Kayla nodded. "I understand." Outside, the farm stretched far in every direction, tall fencing surrounded crops of alien grain, their stalks swaying in the early breeze. In the distance, strange box-shaped machines sat silent, covered in dust from the plains. Daniel handed her a small basket. "Start with the hens," he said, pointing toward a wooden shed near the fence. Kayla walked slowly toward it, Rin following close behind. The hens, plump feathered creatures, clucked and pecked the ground, their eyes following her every step. She had never seen such animals before. When she reached down to gather their eggs, Rin giggled quietly, the sound bright and warm in the cold morning. Daniel watched from the porch, his eyes narrowing slightly. It had been a long time since laughter had touched this farm, but he knew not to let his guard down. Two strangers in his home meant questions, and danger were never far away. By midday, Kayla had learned to move among the farm tools without knocking things over. Rin had found a stick and was chasing small insects near the fence. Daniel was repairing a section of the outer gate when he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. Claw marks, faint but fresh, scraped deep into the wooden post. He ran his fingers over them, feeling the splinters. It wasn't the stalker from last night. These were larger and higher. Something else had been close to his farm while they slept. When Kayla saw his expression, her chest tightened. "What is it?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Could be nothing," he lied. But he knew better. Nothing didn't leave marks like that. As the sun dipped lower, the air grew colder again. Daniel locked the gates early, checking the perimeter twice. Inside, Kayla sat near the small fire with Rin in her lap, telling him a quiet story in their own language. Daniel sat in his chair, cleaning a second rifle he hadn't used in years. The only sounds were the crackle of fire and the steady ticking of the old wall clock. Then, from somewhere far beyond the fence, came a sound, low, drawn out, and echoing across the plains. It wasn't the cry of a beast, nor the call of any animal Daniel knew. Kayla froze, her eyes meeting his. They didn't need to speak. Both knew it was a warning. Somewhere out there, something had found their trail, and it was getting closer. Far from the human farm, deep within the rocky hills. The council fire burned low. Around it sat the elders of Kayla's former clan, their faces lit by the flicker of flame. The eldest leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "She still lives," he said, "and worse, she has gone to the humans." Murmurs rose like buzzing insects, each one filled with anger and fear. A younger warrior stepped forward, bowing his head. "Allow me to bring her back, or silence her forever," he said. The elders nodded. And with that, two trackers were chosen, tall, lean, and silent, their armor dark as the night plains. They moved like shadows. Their orders were simple. No one was to know she had lived this long. Back at the farm, the day passed in a heavy quiet. Daniel worked among the fields, but his eyes often drifted toward the horizon. Kayla helped mend the storage shed, her hands quick and steady. Rin played near the porch, though Daniel noticed he never wandered far from his mother. The strange cry from the night before still echoed in all their minds. As the sun lowered, Daniel walked the perimeter again. Near the north fence, he found another sign, a faint print in the dirt. It was not a beast's paw, nor the boot of a human. It was narrow, long, and deeply pressed into the soil. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Someone's been here," he murmured. That night the air felt heavier. The wind was still, carrying no sound except the soft rustle of grass. Daniel set an extra lantern on the porch, its light reaching farther into the dark. Kayla sat near the fire inside, sharpening a small blade she had hidden in her cloak. Her eyes flicked toward the window often. Rin had fallen asleep curled up in an old blanket, unaware of the tension around him. Beyond the fence, two shapes moved low and silent. The trackers had arrived, their eyes glinting faintly in the moonlight. They studied the farm from the cover of the tall grass. One pointed toward the farmhouse, the other toward the barn. They split apart, vanishing into the shadows. Daniel, sitting near the window with his rifle across his lap, caught a flicker of movement. His instincts told him it wasn't an animal this time. Without a word, he rose and crossed to the door, opening it just enough to step onto the porch. The night was too quiet. Then, from the barn, came the faint creak of wood. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. He moved toward the sound, every step slow and measured. Inside the barn, the air smelled faintly of hay and oil. The lantern light swung gently, casting long, shifting shadows. Somewhere behind him, a floorboard creaked. Daniel spun, rifle raised. A tall figure stood in the doorway, its eyes glowing faintly. Before it could move, another shadow appeared behind Daniel. Kayla, her blade in hand, her stance ready. The intruder spoke in her language, the words sharp and cold. Kayla's face went pale. "They've come for us," she whispered. The barn seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with the smell of hay and tension. Daniel kept his rifle steady, eyes locked on the tall figure in the doorway. Kayla stood slightly to his side, her small blade glinting in the swinging lantern light. The tracker's voice was calm, almost polite, but every word carried a threat. He spoke again in Kayla's language, his tone sharper this time. Daniel's eyes flicked to her. "What's he saying?" he asked, her grip tightened on the blade. "He says we must leave with him, or die here." From the shadows behind the stalls, the second tracker emerged. This one was broader, his armor scratched from years of hunting. His hands rested on twin curved blades, the edges faintly glowing. Daniel realized then they weren't here to talk. He stepped forward just enough to block Kayla and Rin's imagined path of escape. "Tell them no deal," he said flatly. Kayla lifted her chin, meeting the first tracker's eyes. "We are not going back," she said in her own tongue, her voice steady. The tracker's expression did not change, but his fingers curled slowly around his weapon. In the next heartbeat, the barn exploded into motion. The broad tracker lunged first, aiming for Kayla. Daniel fired, the blast echoing like thunder inside the wooden walls. The shot hit the attacker's shoulder, spinning him sideways with a snarl. Kayla ducked low, slashing her blade across his leg, sending him crashing into a pile of crates. The first tracker moved fast, closing the distance to Daniel. The human swung the rifle like a staff, striking the side of the alien's helmet. The force sent him staggering, but not down. Rin, woken by the noise, appeared at the barn door, his eyes wide with fear. "Stay back," Daniel barked. The first tracker glanced toward the boy, a mistake. Daniel slammed the rifle butt into his chest, shoving him backward into the wall. Kayla darted forward, driving her blade into the gap in the alien's armor at the waist. The tracker roared, staggering toward the door, blood dark against his armor. His partner, still on the ground, grabbed his arm, and the two retreated, disappearing into the night. For a long moment, the only sounds were Daniel's ragged breathing and the creak of the lantern. Kayla lowered her blade, her chest rising and falling quickly. Daniel glanced at her, then at Rin, who stood frozen at the doorway. "It's over," Daniel said. Though he knew it wasn't. Kayla sheathed her blade slowly, her voice low. "They will come back. And not alone." Daniel picked up a fresh magazine from the shelf, loading it into his rifle with a sharp click. "Then we make sure this place is ready," he said. Kayla nodded, and for the first time, there was no wall of distrust between them, only the understanding that from now on, they would stand together, outside. In the darkness beyond the fence, a faint glimmer of light signaled to unseen eyes. The trackers had failed, but they had also marked the farm for something far worse. The night after the attack felt longer than any before. Daniel sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, his eyes fixed on the dark beyond the fence. Kayla remained awake too, sitting by the hearth with Rin sleeping in her lap. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them was no longer cold. It was the silence of two people who understood they were now on the same side. By morning, Daniel was already outside, hammering new boards into the fence. Kayla joined him without being asked, carrying tools and checking for weak spots along the wall. They worked in rhythm, the sound of wood and metal filling the air. Every so often, Daniel would glance at her, surprised at how quickly she learned. Kayla's movements were sharp and efficient, her hands steady despite the danger that hung over them. Rin helped in his own way, fetching nails, carrying water, and chasing away the curious hens that wandered too close to the repairs. Daniel caught himself smiling once when the boy saluted him with a serious little nod. It was the first time he'd smiled in months. Kayla noticed but said nothing, only allowing herself a faint, knowing smile. When the sun reached its highest point, Daniel took a break, leaning on the fence. He looked toward the hills in the distance, his voice low. "You should know, I didn't always help your kind," he said. Kayla paused, her hands resting on the handle of a spade. Daniel's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. "I lost my family in a border raid," he continued. "I blamed all aliens for it. All of them." He glanced at her then. "But you and the boy, you're not what I thought." Kayla's eyes softened. "My people, they believe humans cannot be trusted," she admitted. "They see you as dangerous, unpredictable." She looked toward the farmhouse, where Rin was chasing a stray chicken with laughter in his voice. "But you are the only reason we are alive." That evening, they began setting traps around the property. Daniel showed Kayla how to rig tripwires and hidden alarms. She, in turn, taught him how to make silent snares from alien cord that could catch more than just animals. The farm became a maze of quiet defenses, each one meant to slow whatever was coming. Later, as the sky turned a deep purple, Daniel brought out a small weathered box. Inside was an old distress beacon, its surface scratched but still functional. "Last time I used this, help came too late," he said. "But if they come again, maybe it'll be different." He handed it to Kayla. "If I'm not here, press this." She held the device carefully, feeling its weight in her eyes. Daniel saw the silent promise. She would protect this place as fiercely as he would. For the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like the farm was only his. It was theirs now, far beyond the plains, unseen in the darkness. More figures were gathering, armored, armed, and moving with purpose. The trackers had told them everything. And now, the real hunt was coming. The night before the attack was unnervingly quiet. No wind, no rustle of grass, not even the distant cries of night creatures. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, checking every magazine of ammunition. Kayla moved silently around the room, setting the last of their makeshift traps near the doors and windows. Rin lay under a thick blanket in the corner, pretending to sleep but listening to every sound. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, they saw them, dark shapes moving across the plains in a wide line. More than a dozen figures, armored and armed, their weapons glinting in the early sun. Daniel's jaw tightened. "They're not here to talk," he said. Kayla nodded, her eyes hard. "They will not stop until we are gone. Or dead." The first wave came fast, hitting the outer fence. Tripwires snapped, sending hidden spikes upward, forcing the attackers to slow. Daniel fired from the porch, each shot echoing across the fields. Kayla moved to the side fence, her blade flashing as one of the intruders made it through. She fought with a calm, deadly precision. Each strike meant to end the fight quickly. Rin stayed low inside the house, his small hands gripping the distress beacon. When one of the attackers slipped past Daniel's fire and rushed the door, Rin pressed the button hard. A small red light began to blink, sending its silent call far beyond the farm. The attackers regrouped, pressing in from two sides. Daniel shouted a warning, tossing Kayla a spare weapon. She caught it and fired without hesitation, dropping two before they reached the barn. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder, the crack of weapons, and the shouts of battle and explosion. Rocked the west fence as one of the attackers used a charge to break through. Daniel ran to meet them, slamming the butt of his rifle into the first man's helmet before firing point blank into the next. Kayla fought beside him now, their movements in sync like they had trained together for years. Every strike, every shot was timed to cover the other. Then over the chaos came a distant sound: engines. Daniel glanced toward the horizon and saw dust rising in the distance. "Help's coming," he shouted. Kala's eyes flicked to Rin, who was watching from the doorway, hope flickering. In his gaze, the attackers saw it too, and their leader gave a sharp signal. In seconds, they began to retreat, vanishing back into the tall grass as quickly as they had come. Daniel lowered his rifle slowly, scanning for any who might still be hiding. Kala's breathing was heavy, her blade dripping with the dark blood of their enemies. Moments later, a small convoy of human vehicles rolled through the gates. Armed men and women stepped out, taking in the scene with wary eyes. One of them, a tall man in a brown coat, looked at Daniel and said, "Guess we came just in time." Daniel gave a tired half smile. "You missed the fun." Kayla stood with Rin at her side, watching as the humans secured the area. One of the rescuers offered them a place in the settlement, but Kayla shook her head, looking toward Daniel. "If it's all right," she said softly, "we stay here." Daniel met her gaze for a long moment before nodding once. "Then we build it stronger," he said. As the sun climbed higher, the last shadows of the battle faded from the farm. Daniel stood on the porch, Rin sitting beside him, Kayla working quietly in the field. For the first time in many years, the old farmer felt something he thought he'd lost forever. He wasn't alone anymore.